Hello, my name is Carol Carter, and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are delighted that you are joining us this morning for this panel, which is led by Toi Massey, and it's called Everyone is Not at the Table: How COVID-19 Exposes Disparities in Healthcare and Access, Emphasizing the Urgency for Equity and STEM. So we have a lot of wonderful experts today Toi has put together. And for those of you who don't know, I just want to take a minute and tell you a little bit about Global Minded. We are about creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, underrepresented populations into the education, employment, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. We do that through a number of ways, including a first-gen leadership class every year that will be virtual this year, a major annual conference, Inclusive Leader Awards across 14 industries. And then we also have programs at 15 different colleges, historically Black colleges, minority serving institutions, and Hispanic serving institutions. So we are taking our event this year virtual. This is part of our STEM and tech track. And while we're sorry we're not seeing all of you in person this year, we know that the people who have given us time this year and these experts assembled today will really brighten and uplift you and the work that you're doing since you care about this topic. So without further ado, I want to introduce Toi Massey. She is a proud native of inner city Detroit and its public school system. She goes by Toi, but her real longer name is Antoinette, and she holds a Master's of Engineering degree in Mechanical Engineering with a concentration in Nuclear Engineering and a Bachelor of Science in Physics. That journey formally began as a 10th grade member of the first group of 15 recruits from Detroit's Renaissance High School into the Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program, DAP-CEP. She taught math and science in Detroit's K-12 public and charter schools, as well as adult learners collectively over 20 years. The continuous disproportion of women and students of color in the STEM disciplines set her on a mission to embrace the uninitiated, and she founded the JEKL Foundation for STEAM education, incorporating art and design as the collaborative thread across the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines. Toi firmly believes that when girls and students of color see me, see her, they immediately see themselves. When they hear her story, they hear her heart and our shared common experiences. She does an amazing job of connecting with so many people around the possibility of their pursuit of and success within the STEM professions. So she is our panel leader today, and we're delighted to have her lead us in this. Toi, welcome, and welcome to all your panel members.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for having me. As I was listening to you highlight that, which is probably the most important part of my journey, I think it is significant to mention that as I hail from both the aerospace and the nuclear industries in senior leadership in those spaces, the reason JEKL was even founded was because I could not bring enough of the women and people of color into those fields to make this ground level and the playing field equitable. And so with that being said, those that I'm going to introduce to you today are driven by very much a like passion. Today we have on our panel, I'm gonna start with Dr. Calvin Mackie. He's an award-winning mentor, inventor, author, former engineering professor, internationally known, renowned speaker, and successful entrepreneur. Dr. Mackie is the founder of STEMnola, a nonprofit organization founded to expose, inspire, and engage communities about the opportunities in STEM. He has reached over 40,000 students, young people in that endeavor. STEMnola is absolutely an amazing organization, and I've had the partnership opportunities provided to me by Dr. Mackie. Mackie graduated from Morehouse College. He earned a BS in math in 1990, and simultaneously he was awarded a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Georgia Tech, where he subsequently earned his master's and PhD in Mechanical Engineering. He served on the engineering faculty at Tulane University for 12 years. He has won numerous awards, including the 2003 Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Math, Engineering, and Mentoring in the White House ceremony, 2019 Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Phoenix Award, and currently he serves on the Louisiana STEM Advisory Council. He's an author of several books. He's married, he has 2 wonderful sons, and right now he is lending talent to Forbes.com, where he is a contributor in that pen space. Next, we have Dr. Jandel Allen Davis. Dr. Davis is the president and CEO of Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado. She's a world-renowned rehabilitation hospital, exclusively specializing in the neurorehabilitation and research of patients with spinal cord and traumatic brain injuries. Dr. Davis was at one time the Vice President of Government External Relations and Research for Kaiser Permanente. She has 25 years of active practice in obstetrics and gynecology. She is board certified in that space. Dr. Allen believes healthcare will improve when all the primary stakeholder groups, clinicians, patients, elected officials, community leaders, and employers can collaborate effectively to put the patient at the center. I could go on and on. I'm going to allow us to get to know her even better as we speak in this space. She's won several awards. One of the ones that I think is most worthy of mentioning is Outstanding Woman in Healthcare by Denver Business Journal. And excuse me, the MLK Business Award for the state of Colorado, I believe that was. Was that for the MLK Holiday Celebration Commission, Jandel? I think that may have been. But at any rate, she's married with 2 wonderful children. She's a fiber artist whose work is displayed in several galleries over the years. So again, there's that art piece. Now I'm going to take you to Dr. Gerald Briggs. With over 30 years of professional experience in higher education, Dr. Briggs was unanimously selected to become the 8th president of Mississippi Valley State University on October 19th of 2017. It was like a shot that rang around the world. We were so proud. Prior to being selected president, Dr. Briggs served in the capacities of acting president and as executive vice president, chief operating officer at the university. Dr. Briggs, in his capacity, has seen an increase in the university's overall enrollment, more than 200% increase in dual enrollment, and we've seen 11.4% increase over the past 3 years specifically, with a retention rate that has been increased and holding at 10% and above. Before joining MVSU, he served as Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management at Central State University in Ohio. Prior to Central State, he held several different positions at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. And he is, let's see, the thing I think you should really know, and this is where our hearts first connected, is he earned his first degree at Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans there. And he's also held positions at Clark and the College of William and Mary, Georgia Institute of Technology, and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in North Central College. He has 2 wonderful sons, and he is just going to be a wonderful contributor today. You see, I'm speeding this up because we could do this all day. All of this, these people on here are just amazing. Dr. Riddle-Jones, okay, LaTonya Jones, she's the assistant professor of internal medicine and pediatrics at Wayne State University School of Medicine, and the medical director for Corktown Health Center. This appointment she describes as the culmination of everything she has worked to achieve, describing Corktown Health Center as an ideal healthcare center where everyone is served equally. She knew early on that she was going to move into the healthcare system as a result of a incident that found her brother having to be airlifted from her hometown of Inkster, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, and airlifted 30 minutes away in order for him to be cared for. And in that space, she was able to see that many of the healthcare staff, the medical students, the residents, physicians, nobody was looking like her. And so when it happens in those spaces, we just say, we're gonna make a change. Her primary clinical and research interests are in healthcare disparities and health literacy in education. She has completed, let's see, what else do I want to tell you? Because we're going to talk about some of this when we get here. She's a proud wife and mother of 2 fabulous young children. She loves seeing patients in the clinic, and her goal is to keep patients out of the hospital by staying on top of their preventative health needs. She will graduate from Harvard University with a master's in public health and epidemiology on May 28th this year. And that makes her and Dr. Briggs a bit of alumni partners, because he completed a Harvard University Institute of Educational Management program. So with that said, let's get down to why we are here today. I applaud all of you. I'm glad you're here. I'm so happy we're doing this. And one of the first things we want to talk about is we say, you know, everyone is not at the table. In this COVID space, this novel coronavirus has really maybe brought to life for some others what our community has always known, is that we tend to have gross disparities in some of our disease states, things that are more common to us, and usually it's aligned with some very specific indicators, you know, as a result of inequities in other areas, social indicators, educational indicators, you know, and so we tend to suffer in these places. Our access to healthcare, our access to education in pursuit of healthcare, what is the best? How do we get it? Where is this made available to us? Seems to continuously find us in a swirl and a gap that unless we close it, it will not be just a higher percentage of deaths due to things like this coronavirus, but it will be some of the other things that pandemics that we know are probably headed our way over the next so many years. So one of the things Jandel talked about as we got together for the listening audience over the weekend was we need to first define the table, because if we're talking about in this space, we're talking about these social determinants of health, which might be economic instability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, things of that nature. We are at all levels in some way being affected by an absence, perhaps, in those places. So I'm gonna let you all take it from there in terms of how do we define the table? Should I call on you and be like we're back in school?
I can start.
Okay.
I think that the apex of change comes with policy. And if we just let's look at the top table. Let's look at the table where our president sits and the cabinet surrounding our president right now. And if you compare administrations, the administration that we're currently have presiding us, 17 of the cabinet members are white men versus 8 during the Obama administration. So when it comes to the COVID crisis that's going on right now, a lot of the decisions happened at that table and we were not at the table.
Absolutely.
I would, I posed the question on, I guess it was Sunday we were talking, because the fact is that I don't think there's a table that we should not be at, if that
Absolutely.
makes any sense, whether they're political, whether they're corporate boardrooms or nonprofit boardrooms, certainly in healthcare. The interesting thing is that 76, I think is the number of folks who work in healthcare are women. And yet there is absolutely a glass ceiling that a lot of people don't. It's not just women who hit that glass ceiling, but certainly people of color, people with disabilities, et cetera, hit that as well when we think about what the C-suite looks like. So I think that certainly that's another table. I think when I think about education, and I'd love to hear from Dr. Briggs, so I won't name all the tables, but I was thinking about it. There's this thing that happens where the tables that for sure we're at are ones where the DE and I words come up, but it is equally, and I actually am going to be so bold as to say even more important that we're at tables that aren't about DE and I, and there are kids and there are folks who need to be exposed to folks who look like us and who have disabilities and who are women, because there still is a power imbalance in this country and on this globe, and that the more the exposure they have to folk like us who are, I hope, contributing, in fact I know, contributing in incredibly positive ways, it begins to change their paradigms as well. So I think there's not a table we don't belong in.
And one of the things go ahead, Gerald.
No, I was just going to add, absolutely. I agree with everything that's been said. And defining that table also speaks to not only voices being heard, but faces being seen. And that's part of our challenge as we've looked at what's out in the media and everything that's being produced and the briefings and that sort of thing. You don't see very many, or if any, people of color. And it is important that not only our voices be heard, but our faces be seen, and helping people to understand that we are part of the community. We need to be at the table. We need to be seen, and our voices need to be heard, and our faces need to be recognized. So that's another important thing that I think that's missing, that I haven't heard a lot about, and all the experts that's being produced and everything that's being said about what we need to do or don't do. Very little is coming from our faces, and I think that's important to point out.
It's absolutely
I think
important.
It's imperative. And here's the sad and the funny, and Calvin can weigh in on this. We're not missed. So you got 17 old white leadership and males around the table at the executive branch level, and they're not missing the women. They're not missing the faces of color. And like like Jandel is saying, well, you know, the only time we tend to get tapped on the shoulders when someone wants to talk about diversity, you know, inclusion and equity. And it's so much broader. And as you all talk about the table and bring Calvin in, I want you all to think about the first time somebody saw you and you were everything except what you actually are. I remember the first day I showed up at the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I was the third woman, African-American engineer, to be hired at that time in their then 40-year history, only number 3. And the day I showed up, even after a few days before defending an incredible dissertation, thesis, if you will, in nuclear medicine, the first question that was asked of me is if I were the new secretary. No one ever thought maybe she's the new engineer in this whole environment full of engineers. And I'll tell you what my answer was. It's pretty funny, but I'd like to hear from you all on that. And Calvin, if you would weigh in at this time.
Well, hey, thank you all for having me. At STEM NOLA, we believe a high-functioning community is child-centered, adult-governed, elder-ruled. So we believe there's a place for everybody at whatever stage they are in their life. A lot of times when we have these discussions, people begin to talk about the table as it relates to where they are in their profession and where they need to go. So at STEM NOLA, any event that we have, how we approach STEM and as we approach everything, is that we make sure that everything is focused on the kids from cradle all the way to 12th grade. We surround those kids with college students and graduate students. We surround those college students and graduate students with STEM professionals. And we call that vertical mentoring. So the table is everywhere we are and wherever our children, you know, you think about it, we have these big events with hospitals, Jandel, where we go in and we have, let's say for a heart day or a lung day, and the hospital sponsor it, and we'll bring up to 200 kids to the hospital, to some place. The hospital will invite all of their STEM professionals out. They'll dissect a sheep heart for an hour and then build a mechanical heart. And the question I always ask the CEOs and presidents of hospitals is, when was the first time most kids get to meet a doctor? Most of the time is when they're sick in the hospital. And what we do is that we create these environments where kids, Dr. Briggs, get to see people like, get to hear people like them, but more importantly, get to engage with people like them. And the flip side of it is this, because our programming is multi-ethnic, multicultural, and cross socioeconomic regions. So therefore now kids from all different backgrounds get to see the toys and the Mackies in a way that they've never seen them before. So the table is everywhere we need to be. And the reason why I want to bring that up is that many of our kids never even get to see Black males in elementary school. When I was a professor at Tulane, I used to ask, how many of y'all have ever had a Black male scientist, a teacher as a scientist before? And many of my Black students who had gone to these private schools, they had never had a Black person and as a science teacher or instructor. So the table is everywhere. And we have to make sure, whether it's, Maynard Jackson used to say, the book, the ballot, and the buck, right? So we got to be doing this thing in financial, we got to be doing it in politics, and we got to be doing it in education, where healthcare and all that come into play.
Yeah, that pipeline, and that was one of the reasons why I thought it's so significant that this team of leaders was sitting here, as I described before, where I am and where I affect children from ECE to 12th grade, and even those first few years of college, if you will, with STEM and STEM awareness, then you have a Calvin Mackie that takes what Toi Massey does and just puts it on steroids and take it to a whole nother level. From there, we hand them off to Dr. Gerald Briggs at Mississippi Valley State, and he nurtures them there. And then he hands them off to Dr. LaTonya Riddle, where she's educating them in the health and medical sciences at like the Wayne States. And finally, we get them to the Jandel Davises. And in that space, not only are the staff that she's working with getting to see more folks that look like us and we're at the table, but those patients coming in and out, that billing staff, those HR people, and they get to recognize that, when you think about a scientist or a physician, that's JEKL's whole mission, change the face of technology forever. When you see me, and trust me, everything that we do in the corporate space depends on our secretary and administrative staff. They play an incredible role. But when you see me, why don't you think of me as the engineer? Why don't you think I'm the nuclear engineer coming in place? Why don't you see me as the CEO of the Craig Hospital? Why don't you see me as, engineer, PhD who has reached over 40,000 kids? Why can't you see, when you see me, ball cap and all, as Gerald was sitting yesterday, Sunday with his on, and say he's probably the president of a major university? Our voices have to be heard, and therefore our presence must be, we must be there. How do we maintain, and who chooses who gets to go? That's what I want to hear you all talk about next. Who chooses who's at the table? If we're not at the table, who chooses?
Well, that's why sponsorship is so important. And I will tell you, some of my biggest sponsors have not been African-American or Black identified people. They have not been those people, but I've been able to get others to see the talent that I have and recognize it. And they will tell you they want me or my medical students or residents to be their physicians. And it doesn't matter what my race is, what my gender identity is. And so you have to network, right? When you have the opportunity to network, you have to network and make your voice and your skills known.
Well, I think there's another side to that, sponsorship, absolutely. Well, first of all, as I think about the generation ahead of me, there were far fewer, because I'm that first generation of kids, late 60s and the 70s, who got to benefit from the modern civil rights and I dare say women's rights movement. So there weren't as many folks of color. That's certainly, fast forward 30, 40 years, 40, you see where we are now. There certainly are more of us. But one of the things that I think I've learned in terms of this is, and it is a harsh, but it's a harsh truth, and it's grounded in bias. It is absolutely grounded in bias. And yet bias it's part of the human condition. So I'm not here I'm being very values neutral about that. the next layer that gets layered onto that is the notion of politics and both implicit and explicit bias and institutional ways that sexism and racism, other isms get played into it. And what we have got to get real about, even though it is a tough one, is that you will not be seen unless you know the game. And that's the thing that, I mean, I think for young folks that they have to sort of really appreciate and get comfortable to the extent that you can. And I will tell you at the age I am, which I will, I'll keep my age here for the moment. That I will tell you that even at this age, I still struggle with the fact that we have got to be culturally versatile. And that cultural versatility means that you've got to have a little bit of a chameleon-like nature, from the perspective of that ability to step into a boardroom. They're absolutely going to say, and my first one was in med school back in 1983, handed a Foley bag in an operating room in Connecticut, where I was doing one of my surgery rotations as a third-year medical student, and being handed the Foley bag because they thought, which is the urine bag for those who don't know, from a patient to empty it, because they didn't know that I was one of the medical students. They assumed I was there it's my turn to come in now and clean the room, or in hearing from a cardiovascular surgical resident who, same kind of thing, someone handed him a mop. It's African-American man to clean. So there is that is just the reality of it. There's no chips on these shoulders at all. You can't get through life that way, but you've got to know how to play the game, which means you've got to be able to show up. You got to read the room. You got to know the politics. You got to know how to show up, because you cannot change the dynamic unless you are, I hate to say it, invited in to change the dynamic. And that's the nature and the reality of power. Once there, because the minute I open my mouth and start talking, oh, she maybe knows what she's talking about. Whichever room I'm in, whichever conversation I'm in. And we can be pissed off about that, or we can just recognize that's one of the vestiges of slavery and racism and sexism and all the other isms, and say it just is. And now once there, how do you change it? That's your opportunity to change it, and then serve as a sponsor. I
agree with you wholeheartedly. There is no other way around it. You cannot be angry. Anger only kills the host. When that guy said that to me, with all that I thought I had achieved, my response could have been, how dare you? My response instead was to use a little humor. I said, well, actually, I'm not, but if you're getting coffee, I take mine with 2 creams and 2 sugars. That nice big office, and we can talk about your merit from here on out, because I'm ready to work for me. So that's where we go. What are you saying, Briggs?
Well, I think it's also important that we have to speak to the fact that regardless of where we are and what our individual achievements are, at some point in our lives, we've been looked at differently or thought of differently just because of the way we look, as opposed to who we are and what we have to offer to our societies. That's why I always stress the importance of understanding and remembering our history. And remembering those individuals who sacrificed many their lives for us to be able to sit and have these types of conversations, and build on that to say that we have to continue to stress the importance of us as contributors to this broader society, and insist when we talk about who makes the decision about who's at the table. Ultimately, we do, because if we don't, then guess what? We're not going to get invited. So I think it is important that we continue to stress the importance of the contributors that's got us to this point, and realize the importance that our work is nowhere near done. And we have to continue to have that voice of strength and opportunity as we move forward. That's extremely important.
Can I hear from Calvin on this? I need you to make his screen seen. Right now, I don't see him.
There we go. I don't know why my video. I'm having internet problems this morning, but hey, I'm back. I wanted to address that because we're always talking about being at the table. And I walked away in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. My family lost 29 houses. I lost my dad and my stepmother 6 days apart. Months after Katrina, and I lost a six-figure tenure position. the first and only African-American ever tenured in the history of the College of Engineering at Tulane University. And they summarily 572 tenured faculty members, with me being one of them. And we keep talking about diversity, but I'll tell a story about there's over 330 engineering programs in this country, and only 2 reached out to me about a possible position. And I realized then I gotta stop waiting for people to invite me to the table and go create my own damn table. And that is the conversation. That is the conversation in 2020 where we have to be going.
Yes.
At the New York Times article a couple of weeks ago that talked about philanthropy. And if you have a nonprofit or some organization focused on the inequities with Black people, more than likely if it's run by a white person, they'll receive more money. So the bottom line is that you cannot wait for your oppressor to finance your freedom. No. So we got to start addressing our young children from the cradle to the grave about how we participate in this thing called America and create something that we can own and pass on to people that are after us. And I don't care if it's a hospital, a Robert Smith who's worth $6 billion and $50 billion under management in his companies, but we got to start having that conversation. How do we build the table?
Well, that's going to segue right into this next section as we discussed, and all of us kind of gave our opinion in this space about this idea or this paradigm around college versus no college. You know, and we know statistically, economically, we know the advantage of achieving a at least a 2-year, if not, of course, 4 and higher degree. But we're hearing a lot of rhetoric, and it's only being told to our kids. This is what's interesting about, you don't have to go to college, get a certificate. And one of the things that I like to repeat is something I heard Calvin say or respond to when someone was saying, yeah, you can go and get a software coding certificate and you'll get a great job. And Calvin's response was, but you'll never own the company. And this is so, unless of course we think in terms of starting this ourselves. There are extremes in those places, but for us and those that look like us, should we be saying to our children, don't think about college? My fear is that we're going to look up 20 years from now and the only ones without the college degree will be our children. Jandel, you on the screen, why don't you go?
You know, a couple things came to mind. First of all, while being a supporter of apprenticeship programs, I do believe if we look, and it's a grand experiment here in the United States. I mean, Europe's had apprenticeship programs for centuries, basically. But what we are doing, and we need to be honest about this. I said this years ago when the first of the, one of the programs here came up in front of an audience. I said, let's just be clear about one truth, and it's just one of many truths. These apprenticeship programs have come up because, and they are a direct reflection of the failure of our public education in the United States. I mean, it came up more and more as kids were graduating from high school or not, and our community college systems had to spend the first year doing remediation, right? So it's not the total story, and I want to be careful that I'm not blanketing it, but we need, as the leaders, to be honest enough with ourselves to say that in part this is coming up as an answer to kids who were not college ready, which is a reflection of what's happening K through 12 that we've got to focus on. So that's number one. Number two, if we look at therefore where most of those failing schools are, they are going to be in poor communities, and those are therefore going to be disproportionately affected the way we know in terms of whose faces we're going to see behind those. The third thing I say though about these apprenticeship programs is that the grand experiment will have failed if we look back 10 years from now and there's one line that has all the brown kids, and then the college line has all the other kids, or the kids, our kids of, who are legacy kids who they best go to college, or we know what we'll do to them in terms of the role models that they've had in their houses. So, I mean, the bottom line is that it's to use another well overused term in the COVID world, it's a false choice. It's a total false choice. It needs to be an option that's there, but we need to always, I love the way you said that, Calvin. It's like, because it's true. You'll go so far with an apprenticeship, but then as you said, you're going to need more certificates after that. And it does, while not totally out of the question, it makes the potential for even having your resume screened gone if that education isn't there. So.
Right. But again, I want to say my daddy was a roofer. My daddy dropped out of school in the 8th grade to pick cotton. And after Hurricane Betsy in 1965, he put a ladder on his car and eventually employed over 100 mostly black males in New Orleans, fed families, and probably made more money in his life as a roofer than I may make ever as an engineer. But his son is a PhD engineer. See, so my point is that if I would have listened to the educators, I should have been a draftsman or some type of tradesmith because my daddy was a roofer. And they are only giving those choices in Louisiana. There's something called pathways. And I'm like, why don't they have pathways at that private school? When they have pathways at that private school on the street, then I would be for pathways in my 2 sons' schools. So the bottom line is that not only is the voice a false choice, but they're picking and choosing winners and losers at the beginning. Elon Musk released an article last night and he said college is most for fun. Most kids can go get whatever. And I said, that's coming from someone who went to the University of Pennsylvania, got a business degree and economic degree, then went on to study advanced energy. I said, Elon Musk is saying college is for fun because he wants people to go to certificates because he needs cogs in his businesses. He wants employees.
Absolutely.
I'm not talking about the people that otherwise who want to be Elon Musk. I'm raising my boys to be the next whatever, and they can't do that with just certificates.
Yeah.
Dr. Briggs, you get
just to add,
get to you.
one thing that I've always stressed, even in my life and what I speak to when I speak to the students here at Mississippi Valley, I speak about the importance of not just going to college to get a degree, but the educational journey is more important because it really, being educated really transforms lives, transforms communities, builds communities. So going to college the degree is why you go, but the process and the education that you receive is priceless because again, it really matters. I tell my students all the time, at Xavier, my undergrad degree is in chemistry. And I tell them, I've never had a job in chemistry, but I was able to take that experience and that knowledge and being able to be involved in other things beyond just that to really come to a decision about what I wanted in my life and where I wanted my career to go. So it's extremely important to understand that being educated is most important. The degree is part of that, but once you get that degree, hopefully now your mind is expanded and you're able to do some great things. And I think that's the thing that I think sometimes we miss when we talk about our students going to college. Yeah, you go to college to get that degree, and that degree will open some doors, that wouldn't be open for you if you didn't have it. But it's that knowledge, again, that's going to transform lives and really make a difference. And that's what's really important.
Think about this. Now, COVID is a reset button. And Alvin Toffler said the illiterate of the 21st century will be he or she who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So I tell kids, I don't care what your undergraduate degree is in, because it's probably going to be obsolete by the time you walk on the college campus. The sole purpose of an undergraduate degree is to put our children in a position where they can teach themselves. I keep pushing all of my employees. I said, professional study. They think they've gone and gotten a degree, so I've hired them and they think they have enough to do their job. I said, no, your degree told me that now you're in a position where I can teach you. So if you don't want to learn, I got to get rid of you. And that is the COVID reset. 40 million people are out of work right now. And if they're at home licking their fingers and pity and woe is die, and they not re-upping on some skills or learning something to make themselves valuable or marketable, they're in trouble.
I think that you hit on something. I remember when I was leaving corporate and making a decision to launch JEKL, and I called Calvin, another one of our shared friends, Dr. Arnell Cozy, She said, well, you got to meet Calvin Mackie. And the first question he said, I said, well, I need a mentor in this space. He said, well, can you be mentored? Mentorable? Something else. But he was very, you remember that conversation? Because he will tell you, because I'm not wasting my time. But I think that all of us are serving in this space to do just that. Serve as mentors, but then challenge our young people to answer that question. Can you be mentored in this space? I think that college degree says you had the discipline to achieve something, to stick with it. Level of effort was what was, you know, forward leading, beyond whatever the major might have been, you know. So I think that that's important. I want to get to, because we got some questions. People want to hear from you guys. But we talked about actionables. You know, what do we do in this space? Because it's not enough to just we can do this all day. Sit around, offer these, you know, tidbits of wisdom back and forth. But at the end of the day, you know, we need strategies in this place, you know, and I think that's critical. You got 3 engineers sitting here with Dr. LaTonya Riddle was an engineering major before going to medical school. And so we all think in that very strategic place. You got your chemist background here and your pre-med background. So we all think in models. And what does that look like? You know, what is that strategy, closing this gap?
We can start real simple and just make sure that we do not put limitations on our children, and make sure that we don't allow others to put limitations on our children. I think that's the first thing. We talked about tables being wherever we are, and that is so true. If you hear someone putting a limitation on a child, you need to speak up and you need to say something. And so I will tell you, as a pediatrician, I use that clinic visit as a table. And so those kids get in there, the parents or guardians are on the side, and I start talking to those kids about, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, how are we going to do that? Well, you know, you need to learn how to read. Reading is just the key to open up those doors of education. And the parents will look at me and they say, thank you. And for some reason, they didn't feel empowered, or they didn't feel they had the resources and information to empower those children with that. And that's part of building confidence. So I know when I talk to the medical students, I will tell them that medical school is hard. There's going to be a lot of obstacles where your confidence will be shaken or potentially broken, but you cannot allow someone to take that from you. So just real simple, stop putting limitations on these kids and instill confidence. Let's start there.
You said that.
You know, Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Without your consent.
Exactly.
And we really do need to let kids know. One of the things that I would add to this discussion of how we add structure to this is, you know, we know, we used to, we call it the old boys club, right? The old boys club. I mean, what does that club look like from a mentoring and a sponsorship perspective for folks who have not necessarily had access to any of a number of tables? And one of the things we discussed, which was a real, it's why in part this is such a gift to even get a chance to participate, is my network just expanded. And in fact, the way you talk about it, Toy, well, we start here, then it comes, I take them, Calvin, is what's that relay? I mean, we've got to build the chain, the relay that says for, you know, a place like Craig Hospital and a lot of other hospitals around this country. Or it could be, it doesn't have to be healthcare, it can be education, it can be anybody, it can be for sure academics, higher education, let alone, you know, K through 12. How do we make sure that Jandel, who's now in a position where she can, and I would say of influence, and I think that's a really important word and very distinct from power. Not that I'm scared of it, power that is, but I think it's a different, it changes the dynamic. Is how does she get access to the women and the kids of color who are coming out, who want careers and have sought to become physical therapists, occupational speech language pathologists, physical med, rehab, nursing, and want to do the kinds of things that we do here at a Craig. We don't have access to them here. And so how do you all start sending them my way?
You can sit down and make that happen, because I've got all kinds of stuff that I'm thinking of right now. And be careful what you ask for, because Calvin will show up with 400 kids. And
Doors open. Not now. The doors aren't open now. No visitors in COVID.
but, you know, and then to make that avenue available to those students coming out of MVSU, you know, so that they automatically know 6 weeks in the summer, 2 weeks in the summer, you know, you'll shadow here, or, you know, those pre-med students at Wayne State, you know, here's another opportunity in the avenue. And then those students who, because I've got one right now, who's asking me about mentoring support. He wants to go into physical therapy and spine injuries therapy. And one of the things I talk to my young kids when they talk about, you know, as you all know, you go in, what do you want to be? I want to be a basketball player. And I have to shift that paradigm to, that's excellent, but do you understand that's pure physics? That is absolute pure physics, what you're doing. And I'd love for them to see in your space, Jandel, you know, what the body is absolutely capable of doing in that, you know, space, how the, you know, the response of the spine, the brain, and the connection to all of it there. So we definitely do have to build those out, and we can talk about that further. But yeah, it can't end here. Absolutely.
We as professionals have to make ourselves accessible. If I make ourselves accessible, that doesn't mean that people are gonna show up in our office and go, ooh, look at you. We have to go to where they are. They don't even know the route to get to your office or to get to your campus or whatever. One of the biggest challenges we have right now is that everything has become so insular. My biggest battle is with specialist colleges and universities and outreach. I said outreach means to outreach. I mean, college only focus on trying to get somebody to come in. So we find ourselves in a position of influence, whether it's running a hospital or whether it's running a university. We have to make sure that we are going back to the communities that we say we want to engage and empower people and or doing things in those communities such that people can see, touch, feel, and know that we exist. And I challenge executives. I was with a buddy last night, you know, and I said, man, I didn't call him useless, but at the end of the day, he said, well, we need to talk. Because I'm like, you being in this position has done nothing for what we're trying to do. You're making a lot of money. You look good. You look like you got a trainer. But in terms of trying to change the paradigm, the dynamics for our children in their future,
right?
I don't see it.
Right.
Why Booker T. Washington said, I'm sorry, Dr. Briggs, we're separate as the finger, as whole as the hand.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. I mean, again, we have to understand that we shouldn't exist in an ivory tower. You know, me being a university president doesn't mean that I sit in an office and just sort of wield administrative decisions. You have to be engaged. Particularly, you have to be engaged with your students. You have to be engaged with your community. And you have to show that you want to make a difference. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things for me. It's just a blessing that I'm at a university like Mississippi Valley, because when I thought about my career path and thought about becoming a university president, I said I wanted to be at an institution that has basically an understanding of community growth and community change and community development. So you have to be willing, as what's being said, you have to be willing to participate and not just think that I've gotten to a point in my life where, again, I have a title, I have all these things, but I'm still a human. I'm still just like everybody else. Because if there wasn't people in my life who saw something in me and made a difference, guess what? I wouldn't be sitting here today. So that's extremely important for me. And that's why it's a blessing to be at a university like this, to have a career in higher education, because it made a difference for me. And I'm going to make sure that I make a difference in other people's lives going forward.
So with that, and I love it, we're going to do a little strategy here. We got about 10 minutes left, and I got about 10 questions. And so we're going to do, let's see, a kind of a round robin. I'll ask the question that's being asked of you from the audience, and maybe try to give a 30-second, 45-second response, and, you know, we'll hand it off from, you know, Dr. Riddle-Jones, Dr. Allen Davis, Dr. Briggs, Dr. Mackie, and then come back around. And unless you pass, you have the option to pass. So one of the first questions here, how are the intersections of race and sexuality at work? And how do you all ensure that others aside from cis, heterosexual people of color are at the table? That's an interesting question. I'm gonna leave that one to you.
That's a great question.
Mhm.
You have to.
Hey, at Corktown, you work with
Yeah.
the LGBTQ community, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're a safe space for everyone, especially focused on that community. So you really have to educate. So you have to be comfortable making other people uncomfortable if you're in a position or you have a seat at the table. And you have to come with your information. You got to come with your data. You got to come with your facts, because a lot of people, their mouths will drop open when they hear that there are only 3% of men, or 3% of medical schools are made up of Black males, and that statistic hasn't changed since the late 1970s. You know, no one knows that, no one advertises that. No one talks about the fact that suicidality is 50% in the trans community. No one discusses or talks about that. So if you have a seat at the table, you need to open your mouth. You need to be comfortable making others uncomfortable. But you got to know your facts. You got to know your information. You have to be armed with that, and then you need to feel comfortable educating.
I like that.
That's how you create
Comfortable making others uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Well, I think, that which is measured is managed.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have to do, and I don't mean this in terms of checking boxes, but you've got to have the intentionality to say you're going to diversify a place and think about it through the intersectionality that was just talked about, but any one of a number of other folks who aren't present. One of the things that's beautiful, and I'll be brief, about being at Craig in terms of my own awakening, and I think that's a fair way to put it, is you walk around a Craig hospital with people with broken bodies and broken minds, which is what we have, and we bring such hope and healing. The resilience of humans is just breathtaking here. And you cease to see after a while. You just see people. And so until or unless you make sure that you're going to have the kind of intentionality that allows you to see an LGBTQ person as a person who has unique needs, or a disabled person, or an African-American, you name it, as a person, we're not going to get there. And so we've just got to be intentional about it. I've chosen to start with my board, which needed to get far more diverse than it was. And frankly, the workforce one is harder. It's where we need you all.
Dr. Briggs.
I'll just add, any form of discrimination is wrong, any form. And we have to understand the importance that we all have gifts to share. Regardless of our background, regardless of our experiences, we all have gifts to share. And so any discrimination is wrong, and we have to understand that and realize that, and say that if you do have discriminatory thoughts or whatever based on anything, that's wrong. And be open and understand that we all have something to give, and be accepting of that.
I like that. Okay, I'm Dr.
And you have to change policies. You have to change policies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but but at the same time, it's one thing. I'm all about being active, and I try to make my staff understand that we have one job here, and that is to serve our children. And to do that, I mean, we have to produce, and I allow everybody to bring their whole self to work. And anybody that's staying in somebody else's way of producing, that is a problem for that person. And that has to be very clear.
Excellent. I have a question here. This actually may be for you, Dr. Briggs, but how do we keep our students from getting into debt trying to learn and obtain these degrees? Could you talk some more about what sponsorship looks like? Maybe define it a little better, and scholarships and grant availability. Most of the hesitancy to pursue higher education seems to be related to money.
Well, I think that we have to first think of that from a broad perspective. Being, what's the return on that investment? What's the return on that investment? What is this education going to allow for me in my life? And understand, how do you balance that? But I also think that there's a lot of untapped monies that's out there that we just don't promote enough. And one thing that
$49 billion become available every year, and about $8 billion goes back untapped.
Exactly. So one thing that I have is an access educator. that really, that's their job, to help students find resources. So again, there's a lot of untapped dollars that's available. There's a lot of corporate monies, all of those things to help to support students in college. So I think that's one important thing. But that return on that investment, I think, again, is something that we have to continue to speak to and speak about. Is it worth getting into debt to get that degree? What is that degree going to do for you? Now, again, I went back to and I talked about education. That degree, hopefully, again, is just part of your education, and understanding when you're educated, then you can make some other broader decisions. So hopefully, you can find a place where you can afford, like a Mississippi Valley State University, and really say, okay, that return on that investment is worth it. But at the same time, I've always tell students, don't borrow more than you need.
Mhm.
Don't borrow more than you need. And sometimes that's hard, or sometimes we have parameters now that there's no limits to that, but don't borrow more than you need, and really understand that once you graduate and get into the workforce, really, hopefully, again, your mind is broader, you're more expansive, and you're able to manage that a lot better than you would if you didn't have that degree.
Dr. Mackie, talk about the choice. If you're gonna go to college and you know you're gonna have to take out loans, then you probably should major in something that will afford you a salary to pay back those loans.
Well, I have a 15 or 16-year-old, and I sent them an article this morning about the top 5 degrees that do a salary. I really believe a lot of things catch your eye, but very few things catch your heart. Pursue the things that catch your heart. So I'm not one to say everybody should go in engineering and STEM just pay. That if they have the passion for whatever they believe in and willing to work. The problem with most of our kids is that they just think I go to college and I can graduate with 5 Ds and I'm gonna be okay, without realizing that they're going out into a world that's very competitive. And I went to college with $200 in my pocket. I finished undergrad with $9,500 in the bank. I finished my PhD with $100,000 in liquid assets. Students never ask me how. They never ask me how. They keep talking about, how to get loans. I'm like, you don't need loans if you're willing to put in the work and do the things. I'm not about debt and going into debt for education when there's so much money and pathways for people to get it if they're willing to, as they say, everybody want to be a boss, and everybody talk about hustling until it's time for them to hustle. And then, well, how do I get the money? Well, you hustle.
Mm-hmm. That you speak of, we could talk about this again, a whole nother conversation. JEKL does a program called From Backpacks to Briefcase, and one of our units involves, just sitting down with students and creating profiles that allow them to identify those dollars that are available. We have more empty seats. Parents don't bring them in and sit with us to sit with them in order to make it happen. So we got to educate parents too on what this looks like, because there's money out there, but you got to go after it. It ain't coming after you. One of the other questions relative to this was, what do members of the panel think about embedding certain certifications within degree programs? And does this add value and relevancy? Could it revitalize academia as well as be seen as cost-saving tool for students, especially minority students who may face the financial burden of student loans? Before I release that, I want the audience to hear me real clear. You take loans out for automobiles that depreciate from the time you drive off of the lot. You take loans out for a mortgage of that new home or condo you want, and you do it without fear. If it requires a loan to go to school, you can't be afraid. Just like Dr. Briggs said, what's the return on the investment? But if one of you all or a few of you all want to answer that question regarding incorporating certifications within degree programs, and does that add value and maybe relevancy?
You know what, Toy, I'll start, and I hate to say this, but I have to host a meeting right at the top of the hour. So I would say, if it does not extend or prolong the time to get to your goal, do it. If it somehow or other enhances, do it. And I couldn't agree with you more. Don't be afraid to listen, we pay them back. It just takes time. You get them done. You just pay them back. Don't be afraid of it. And it is unlike a car or a home that depreciates in value. This one appreciates in value.
I appreciate it.
And Jandel, thank you so much. And Toy, what I'd like to invite you all for, because there have been so many questions, this has been so engaging, is if you have some time, a couple of you do, or everyone except Jandel, we sometimes do something called Talk Back. And so we can just stay for a few more minutes because people are very, very engaged. This is a critical topic. And I just want to add on there on this topic of paying for things that often you can start at a community college, you can transfer to the four-year schools later. And that's another way that people can save a lot of money in doing some of these things. So
I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for the
Thanks so
opportunity to
much,
participate.
David.
Best to all of you out there in cyberland
All right.
somewhere. Bye, you all.
thank you.
Bye.
So at this time, if you all have a few more minutes, we could answer the questions here. Another option is to kind of shoot the questions out to you via email, and perhaps they can be answered and put on the Global Minded webpage, if that's an option. But what does your time look like for the remaining three of you all? Do you have a couple of more minutes that we can do in this talkback space?
I have
Yes.
a few more minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, I have probably about 5-10 more minutes.
Okay, well, here's one, I think, let's see. Okay, someone was asking about, I'll send that information as well. Someone was asking about websites that may have information on scholarships and things. Let's see. Okay, I'm so loving the comments. I'm trying to build my own table by mentoring students through a virtual success coach. Someone mentioned networking. Is there some guidance that you might be able to offer in how they might serve our young people in that space? I think LaTonya, you might have talked about the networking.
Yeah, I did talk about networking. Just something that was mentioned earlier was making ourselves accessible, making sure others are invited. And so if you know someone who is a person who could be a great mentor to someone, invite them to an event or create an event. You can create a networking event, a college fair, things like that. So you have to be creative. But if you go to a talk or hear someone to speak, stay afterwards, go meet that speaker, have some business cards ready to go with your information, your contact information, and ask for business cards so you can collect that information. But you have to follow up. Don't just ask people for business cards and not follow up within a day or so with an email or a thank you. You have to close the loop, close the communication.
And Toy, I'll add one other thing in there. Global Minded has a bold goal to connect 25 million first-gen students, first-gen grads, those who work with them and those who want to hire them, like an eHarmony for first-gen. And we're working with Dr. Michael Torrance at Motlow State College and a woman who's a Latina leader from MIT. And there's a panel on that actually this Friday, closing this week. So we realized, no one college, no one organization can have all those vast networks that these students need, and it has to really robust matching on a lot of different levels, not just for college, but during the career.
Excellent.
The person, Troy, may I? Because the person said they're trying to create their own table. So for me, that kind of inferred that they're trying to create a business around this. And when you're trying to create a, you have to find the value proposition. We just talked about a lot of things that's missing. We talked about parents need to be educated. We talked about kids need to be motivated. You have to create a value proposition such that parents will pay you to solve these problems for them. So if you do it online, you want to think volume. So, I'm working on something right now where parents send me $4.95 a month. It throw $4.95 a month away, but I think I've created a value proposition such that if they get on the other side of this wall, it'll be worth $4.95 a month for them. Now, I had 1,000 parents a month, that's $5,000. So you got to find a value proposition. Then you have to go find those parents that otherwise willing to invest in you willing to invest in their kids by investing in you to the value that you're bringing to them.
That's excellent response. So with that being said, may we make your access to each of you available to the students that access the Global Minded Network, and they may have questions, or if that's possible, let me know and I'll pass that on to Carol, and we'll close out at this time. Do you all want to close out with any final words of wisdom to share? This is the power hitting panel right here. It's just, I can just
Awesome.
Dr. Briggs?
I think, yes, I'll just say, when we speak about mentoring and that sort of thing, that's a lifelong process. I know I have mentors still in my life from my experiences as Xavier. And so the importance of giving back is something that I think we all need to recognize is extremely important, particularly for us. And being willing to give and not seek something in return is really, I think, important as we're building our future. Our next generations are already here. There are leaders to come, and we have to empower them to make a difference, and to understand that my door is always open to help, to mentor, to guide, because again, there were individuals who did that for me. And so it is important that we grow our own and be a part of that growth every day.
The seat at the table. Dr. Riddle?
Absolutely. Two things. First is ask for help. Ask for help early. If a professor or someone's office hours, go use those office hours. They're giving you access. Take advantage of every opportunity when someone gives you access, okay? That's the first thing. And the second thing is setting goals. That's important, but you need to write your goals down and even take it a step further. Envision your goals or have a vision board so you can look to see what it is you're actually going after. And I guarantee you will have more success in attaining those goals if you do that. Excellent.
Take us home, Calvin. Dr. Mackie?
One word that we don't use with our students anymore is sacrifice. You know, in this Instagram, Facebook age of instant gratification, everybody want what they want when they want it. Whatever public health officials say don't mean nothing. Whatever the government say don't mean nothing. I'm going to the beach because I want to be at the beach, and don't tell me nothing. And we challenge them to sacrifice. Whatever you want in this world, there's a price and there's things to be sacrificed. I went to college 11 years. I got 4 STEM degrees in 11 years. I sacrificed. I was the janitor every summer while working my intern during the mornings. During the day, I sacrificed. And if you're going to achieve anything in this world, all these people on this thing, they have sacrifice. From a financial standpoint, I call it the can theory. Make as much money as you can, put it in the can, and sit on the can. You're going to have enough money in the can where you can invest in Wall Street, in stocks, in cars, in houses. So sacrifice. Work hard and sacrifice. And let me end with this, Toy. If you work the next 4 years, like most people are not willing to work, I promise you, you get to spend the rest of your life like most people will never be able to live, because most people are not willing to work 1 year, let alone 4.
Yeah, work hard now, play hard later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Here.
this morning. This is, I love you dearly. So, Carol, we'll let you close us completely.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you so much. First of all, just want to acknowledge each of you are the most incredible role models. And I think, we believe like students need role models and mentors and those internships and those job connections in that network. So thank you for being those role models today for our students. And we will be posting this on our YouTube channel so you can share it out widely with your own networks. And then we look forward to inviting all of you, hopefully in 2021 with a vaccine in early spring, to come to Denver and see Toy live and meet Celeste and our team. And our conference is 65% diverse people. So all the students walking around see all the role models. First gen people have stars on their name tags. They can see themselves even when they're sometimes at institutions where they don't see this. So Toi and I are going to put our heads together, and we're going to look at some cool things we can do with some NSF funding that we're going after. But just a real honor to work with all of you today, and always incredible to work with Toi. And thank you so much for being willing to work with us. We are believers in uncommon collaborators are the only way we're going to close the equity gap. So we all have to work with different people, not in our lanes, and that's how the magic of the big levers are going to really start to move at a time where we desperately need them to move as fast as possible. So thanks to all of you. Have an amazing week. We're doing STEM all week here, and you'll see that it's STEM field kind of homogenous. As I said to Toi, we got to really mix it up. It's our opportunity, and look forward to doing that with all of you. And thank you so much for your generous leadership today.
Thank you.
Great to see you all. Celeste, thanks so much. We'll see you all soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.